the U.S. House of Representatives has voted to repeal the controversial Cadillac tax. This was a revenue-generating portion of the Affordable Care Act. It taxes the most expensive employer-sponsored insurance plans to the tune of 40%. So it's a big deal. It has a big impact on those very expensive employer-sponsored health insurance plans. It was not implemented immediately when the Affordable Care Act was signed. It wasn't intended to be implemented immediately, but the can keeps getting kicked down the road because it's not popular with either Democrats or Republicans. Most recently, in 2018, was a new set implementation date, and that actually got delayed to 2022. So there has been a lot of talk about whether or not this should indeed finally be implemented. And most recently, the U.S. House of Representatives voted 419-6 to actually repeal this provision of the Affordable Care Act. That bill is now in front of the U.S. Senate. Now, this has an intended impact. The Congressional Budget Office says this applies to plans with a value of over $11,000 for an individual or closer to $30,000 for a family. It encourages employers to spend more on employee wages and less on insurance plans, the way that it was presented by the Congressional Budget Office in their impact justification. That was seen as a way to lower overall health care costs across the entire system, and it claims only the wealthiest and major companies and the most generous labor unions would be the one impacted. So those were the talking points about why this Cadillac tax at 40% was designed. So let's look at some of the concerns with that. First of all, a lot of folks, especially those big labor unions, said, look, we have workers here that have been negotiating away wage increases in exchange for much better health insurance packages. The more expensive, more Cadillac of the health insurance packages have been in exchange for wage increases. And now you want to tax that and essentially impact those workers in the process. So the big labor unions are the ones that said, we don't want this at all. But you have other employers saying, hey, we're just in a district that's not very competitive in our marketplace, so our premiums are much higher anyway. So you have employers that say, hey, we have lower wage workers. We're just paying through the teeth on insurance. It's not a Cadillac plan. It's just expensive. You have other people saying, hey, look, employer plans aren't as generous as this rule would hint that they are. And in fact, even though it looks like they're expensive, we have people paying out of pocket to the tune of thousands of dollars in copays and deductibles and coinsurance. So it looks like it's a more generous plan, but actually the employee himself is contributing a lot more than you might think. So a lot of impact on workers is what some of the naysayers are saying. A lot of the Republicans are saying, we don't want another tax and we don't like the Affordable Care Act anyway, so this is a good opportunity to scrap another provision of the Affordable Care Act. And here's again why. Because this is the major revenue source envisioned in the Affordable Care Act to the tune of almost $200 billion. This is what pays for things like Medicaid expansion and a lot of the more generous essential health benefits and market stabilization features that are needed to make the Affordable Care Act work. So you can see why both sides of the aisle might want to chip away at this Cadillac tax. One, because of the impact on workers and labor unions, and the other because of the impact it could have, if we get rid of this, the impact it can have on the overall Affordable Care Act. It's a provision of the Affordable Care Act that appears to be a lose-lose where no one's happy about it, either side of the aisle, but a win-win in the fact that it helps to make sure that you can lower healthcare costs and build the revenue you need to stabilize the entire marketplace. It doesn't appear that there's a right answer here. And certainly as we're getting into an election year and you have people out on the campaign trail talking about ways to improve healthcare coverage for more people and bring down costs, I don't think you're going to hear a lot of people singing the praises of the Cadillac tax. In fact, I think you're going to hear people talk similar to the way that the House of Representatives said, let's just scrap this thing and try something else. So scrapping this major revenue source of the Affordable Care Act to help protect the workers and labor unions, as a lot of the Democrats running for office are suggesting, could have some unintended consequences, but politically might seem favorable at the moment. So what's left to do to this, short of repealing it or striking it? Well, a lot of advocates are saying, just repair the thing. You can still generate revenue out of a Cadillac tax. Just change the threshold at which it attaches. Instead of that 40% tax on this X dollar amount plan, $11,000 for individuals, $30,000 for families, change the attachment point for that. Maybe make it, a $50,000 insurance plan for families. But play with the numbers a little bit before you scrap it entirely. It's really going to be up to the U.S. Senate to decide what happens next, and we'll keep you posted if that happens. If you want to read a little bit more about the Cadillac tax and that U.S. House of Representatives vote to repeal it, we give you a couple sources here. You can certainly send us your questions on the Affordable Care Act, the Cadillac tax, or other provisions, and we can get back to you, and you can find us at healthwatchwisconsin.org.